We had a pretty surprising update come out on Sportcenter today, and honestly, it caught a lot of us off guard. You know how it is. Before the season even tips off, you want to feel like your team is healthy, like everything's lining up the right way. But right now, the conversation has shifted back to injuries. Yeah, injuries. And it's Josh Hart, once again, at the center of it. He revealed that he's dealing with the same finger issue we've been hearing about since the summer, only this time he admitted that it's been re-aggravated, and it's something he's going to have to manage all year long. When I first heard him say it live on Sportcenter, I thought, man, here we go again. This is not what Knicks fans wanted to hear. Hart himself basically admitted his finger looks terrible, and you could see it in the video. It wasn't something you could just brush off. He said he had a procedure done in the off-season, tried to rehab it, but ended up re-injuring it. And now the expectation is that he'll have to play with a splint on his hand for the entire season. Think about that for a second. This isn't just tape or a minor wrap. A splint changes how you hold the ball, how you shoot, how you rebound. And Hart even admitted he hates playing with anything on his hands because it messes with his feel for the game. That's where the concern really sets in. Josh Hart is not some role player who can just hide in the corner. He's one of those glue guys who keeps the Knicks together, rebounding, pushing the pace in transition, defending multiple positions, doing all the little things that don't always show up on the box score. But all of those things require his hands to be right. You want to crash the glass and grab boards over bigger forwards? You need that grip. You want to push the ball in transition and finish through contact? You need to control the ball. Even his passing, that quick kick-out he's so good at, requires confidence in his hand, and right now, that's compromised. Now, Hart said something interesting. He's willing to tough it out. He's ready to play through the pain and figure it out later. Maybe even go back for another procedure next summer. And look, I respect that mentality. That's a competitor right there. He doesn't want to sit. He doesn't want to miss time. He wants to be out there with his teammates. But let's be honest. If he's not 100%, if he's constantly fighting that finger, how effective can he really be? And should the Knicks even consider starting him if this is something that will limit him all year? That's a real question because, under Tom Thibodeau, availability has always been one of the biggest factors for playing time. But Mike Brown, with his different approach, might have to think about managing Hart differently. Maybe Hart comes off the bench instead of starting. Maybe his minutes get reduced depending on how much the finger affects him in-game. That's not something Knicks fans want to hear, but it's a reality that has to be addressed if Hart's production dips. Here's the other thing, and this was brought up on the show as well. Would it have been smarter for him to just get the procedure fixed properly now and miss some time early in the season, instead of trying to push through the entire year compromised? Because chemistry matters, especially for a team with new pieces and high expectations. If Hart is dragging this injury all year long, it could affect not only his role, but also the overall rhythm of the Knicks. So, here we are. Hart is determined to play, and the Knicks are preparing for him to be available. But let's not pretend this isn't a big story. For a guy whose game relies so much on toughness and versatility, having to wear a splint and adjust to it all season is no small deal. Knicks fans have every right to be concerned about how this will impact the rotation, the rebounding battle, and the team's intensity on both ends of the floor. That's how Sportcenter broke it down today. And honestly, it left me with more questions than answers. Is Josh Hart really going to look like himself this season? Or are we about to see a version of him that's fighting his own body the whole way? When I was watching Sportcenter today, something really stood out. Josh Hart kept talking about his finger, and then, almost in passing, he dropped a comment that made everybody in the studio stop for a second. He admitted that last year, when this whole thing first started, he thought he knew what the injury was. He thought it was one thing, took a little break, came back to basketball, only to find out later that it was worse than he originally believed. And you could tell right away he might have been misdiagnosed. That's huge, because think about it. Hart went through an off-season procedure trying to address an issue, only to realize now, months later, that he didn't even have the full picture back then. And the way he phrased it, it almost sounded like now, at least, he finally knows exactly what the injury is, which means that when next summer comes around, he can actually get the correct procedure, rehab the right way, and hopefully be fully ready for the following season. But this year, he's stuck with that finger the way it is, and the only solution is a splint. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. In basketball, your fingers aren't just important, they're everything. Shooting, dribbling, rebounding, passing, it all goes back to your hand. For a player like Josh Hart, who does a little bit of everything, who rebounds better than most guards in the league, who thrives off energy and hustle, that's a nightmare scenario. Can he still rebound at that elite level if he can't grip the ball? Can he push the pace in transition if his hand doesn't feel right? These are the kinds of questions that start to creep in when you realize he'll be dealing with this all year long. And here's the tricky part. Hart isn't backing down. He said straight up, he wants to play every game. He wants to push through the pain. He wants to be there for his teammate. And I respect that mentality. You want your guys to be warriors. You want them to be committed. But at the same time, Sportcenter raised the point. Could him playing hurt actually hurt the Knicks? If his defense slips, if his shooting takes a hit, if his rebounding isn't what it usually is, that doesn't just hurt Hart. It hurts the whole rotation. That's the balance the coaching staff has to figure out. Now, while Hart is battling through his own situation, the good news coming out of Knicks camp is that the rest of the roster looks healthy. And that includes one player who was surrounded by questions all off-season. Karl Anthony Towns. You guys remember the chatter, right? Reports flying around about procedures on his knee, about a hand issue, even that viral clip during the playoffs where he looked down at his hand and said he thought he broke a finger. It sparked weeks of speculation. But on media day, when Towns was asked point-blank if he had a knee procedure, he shut it down immediately. "No, I did not," he said, cutting off the question before it could even get rolling. Now, I'll be real with you. Just because he didn't have a full-on procedure doesn't mean he didn't have treatments. That's part of being an NBA player. These guys get their knees drained, they get injections, they go through specialized recovery all the time. So, yeah, maybe he didn't go under the knife, but it's hard to believe he didn't have something done, given how banged up he looked late last season. We all saw it. Every time he caught the ball, there was a grimace, running up the floor, tugging at his hand, trying to shake off the pain. He wasn't himself, but heading into this year, the picture is completely different. Towns looked comfortable. He looked confident. He looked healthy. And that's a huge relief, because let's be honest, the Knicks cannot afford to start this season with more injury drama. With Hart already compromised, the last thing this team needs is their big star limping into training camp. Instead, what we heard today was reassurance. Towns says he's ready. Jalen Brunson is good. OG Anunoby is good. Mitchell Robinson is good. And maybe for the first time in a long time, this Knicks roster, outside of Hart, looks fully healthy heading into the grind of the season. Sportcenter wrapped that segment with one simple message. Knicks fans should be counting their blessing, because when your two biggest stars, Brunson and Towns, both enter the year at 100%, that's the kind of foundation you want when you're talking about chasing a championship. And for a franchise that hasn't had a title in over 50 years, health is going to be just as important as talent. For the Houston Rockets, things have shifted dramatically following the news that Fred VanVleet suffered a torn ACL. That injury immediately dropped their championship outlook, and you can see it reflected in the odds. Right now, Oklahoma City still holds the top spot at plus 210, followed closely by the Cavaliers at plus 650. The Denver Nuggets sit at plus 750, with the New York Knicks coming in next at $1,000. After them, the Los Angeles Lakers are listed at 1,400. But the biggest slide belongs to the Rockets. Just recently, they were tied with the Knicks at $1,000. Now, they've fallen all the way down to 2,600, a massive drop that shows just how devastating the VanVleet loss really is for their chances this season. And this brings the focus back to New York. When you consider how badly an injury like VanVleet's can derail a season, the update on Josh Hart is even more concerning. The veteran admitted that his finger issue will likely linger for the entire year, and he's already preparing to play with a splint. That raises the question, why not take care of it now? Yes, Hart is a critical piece for the Knicks, but having him at less than 100% all season could do more harm than good. In reality, the smarter option may be to undergo the procedure immediately, get healthy, and return in time to make an impact during the stretch run or postseason. Otherwise, the team risks going through the entire season with Hart limited in his rebounding, ball handling, and defense, all areas where he's typically invaluable. Still, outside of Hart's situation, the rest of the roster is fully healthy, and that's the key. If there's ever been a year for the Knicks to capitalize, it's now. The Eastern Conference is vulnerable, and New York's depth, leadership, and coaching all point toward a team that has a legitimate path to the NBA Finals. This group has to maximize the moment, because the window to bring a championship back to New York is wide open. So what do you think? Should Josh Hart shut it down now and get the procedure done, or push through and fight with the splint all season? And more importantly, do you believe this Knicks roster can truly take advantage of this opportunity and finally deliver a title?